give you some ideas on what's happening in the next year or two, and how that impacts you. And I know that here we are in Atlanta, the tennis capital of the world, literally. And sometimes, you know, everything is great. You've got your lesson books full. You've got the pipeline flowing, and that's a really good thing. But there's a bigger picture, and I hope that I can share some ideas about what you might want to think about and where the money's going to be flowing in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. So kind of get you up to speed on that. So let's take a look. The topic of this is positioning youth tennis for success. Has anybody seen this book? Raise your hand, nice and high. Okay, there's like 5 people or 6 people. This was a book that was prepared by Dr. Brian Hainline, and he was charged with putting together. So here we are. We're rolling out. And that's collectively. We're rolling out 10 and under tennis. Brian Hainline was our chief medical officer at the USTA. He's now since moved on. Just in the last few months, he's the chief medical officer for the NCAA. But he was looking at this, and we are, just like Bill said, we're writing curriculum. We're consulting with people. We've got all these things. We've got all these ideas. We're saying, this is a great thing. This is a great thing for kids. This is a great thing for participation in this country. It's a really good thing. And Brian says, wait a minute, let's make sure that what we say and everything that we say and the direction that we are moving kids and coaches, we're moving in the right direction. So he created a symposium. He brought in worldwide the best people from tennis, the best people from education, the best people from medicine, the best people from child development, you name it. He had experts there, and it was about a year and a half ago in Tampa, and he was going to write a position paper on 10 and under children, 10 and under tennis. Well, this is a position paper. He got writing and he got going, and it's a 106 page manual that he put together, and he's got all the research based information on here, and he's got things on injuries, he has things on child development, you name it. We covered it, and he started to write, and he couldn't stop. So we have a 106 page manual. If you ever go to the USTA website, this is on the first page. It's been there for about a year. You can click on this and download this or purchase this, and Bill is going to be doing some other things. There's an executive summary, and I think I can get that on a PDF form, so maybe we can send that out post-workshop to you. So positioning youth tennis for success. How do we move youth tennis? How do we move it forward? How do we compare with other sports? How do we compare with other tennis federations in the world? And so that's what we wanted to look at. So, typo there. But then we also want to take a look at where we are with tennis, 10 and under tennis. We want to look at the success stories, and we want to look at where we're maybe not doing so well. So if that's okay with everybody, let's move forward. So the youth sports crisis. You say, well, what does that have to do with me? I'm teaching here. I'm doing well, and you're going to show a slide like this, right? And so worldwide childhood obesity is epidemic, and the USA is leading the way. We're number 1 in overweight society. That's not kids. That's us. That's adults. And it's a huge problem. And I just came from a workshop, and in a workshop it was a seminar on what are we going to do about this. And you take a look at it, and I was involved with this as an Aspen Institute, and it's a think tank, and they brought a whole bunch of people together, and the topic was youth sport and how do we get kids more active, because it's an epidemic. And we have people from the health industry, and they're saying it's not what we do, it's we must do this or we will bankrupt this country in another 20 years, because the healthcare costs are just escalating and they're becoming phenomenal. So we need to get kids moving. And I know that today, when I look at the agenda, every speaker that we have, we're going to get kids moving. And we need to be the model sport for activity and action and movement. And we'll talk quite a bit about that, not only in this presentation, but in other things that we'll be doing today. So we know some of these things have just disappeared. So why do we have this epidemic? Well, we know that spontaneous play. Everybody in this room, you probably got home from school, and what was the first thing you did? You probably hopped on your bike and you went someplace and you did what? You played, and you played until when? Dark, or the lights came on, right? And everybody has that same type of experience. That just doesn't happen anymore. I remember we lived in a neighborhood in Houston, Texas, and I thought, gee, there's no kids around here. And I never saw any kids. There was one family that had a basketball, and they were shooting baskets. They played catch in the street, and it was great. But I thought, gee, it's funny. This is a neighborhood, and there's no kids here. First day of school, all these kids are standing around the bus stop. Well, where do these kids come from? I mean, there's 50 kids here, but I never saw them outside playing. And it was very, very, very strange. So, spontaneous play has all but disappeared, and that's it's going to be a huge problem because we can take a look at some surveys. I was just reading some surveys on elite athletes compared to non-elite athletes. And one of the number one factor, and they surveyed the Olympic athletes. I've been involved quite heavily with looking at a lot of research that they do with Olympic athletes. And the number one factor that separated the elite, the Olympic athletes, compared to the non or the near elite. So I like those terms, elite, near elite. So okay. So you know what it was? It was the amount of time that athlete spent in spontaneous or free play. Think about that in your kids, right? You have kids that show up and they come lesson after lesson after lesson, right? Right? So who gets better? The one that is practicing, the one that is playing, the one that is doing all these other things outside of that hour lesson that you have. Is that surprising? No, it's not surprising at all. Think about any other sport, any other activity. How many have taken music lessons before? Like piano lessons, right? And if you just showed up and the only thing that you did, so Greg Clappman shows he's playing piano. And okay, you go to your piano lesson, you play at your lesson, and then you go for another week. And Greg, you haven't done anything, you show up at your next lesson, what happens? You start all over again. And so you don't have that continuum. You're not continually building on that base. So that spontaneous play, that deliberate play that kids do is critical. And we need to get that back. We need to have opportunities to get that back. We'll talk a little bit about more of that. So we talk about professionalization of youth sport. What does that mean? Right? So we're just talking about, okay, we think the tennis people are crazy. How about soccer? How about hockey? How about lacrosse? Lacrosse is running into the same problem. So early specialization, what does that mean? And on your chart, you got this little chart, and we can do some recommendations. We're going to change one of the recommendations here because we think we got kids playing too much. And the early specialization is really driving kids away from the sport. Long term, it's driving kids away from the sport. The USOC, United States Olympic Committee, is conducting a survey of Olympic athletes from 2010 and beyond. No, excuse me, 2000 and beyond, sorry. 2000 and beyond. They surveyed, and the survey just went out a week ago. And they've got already 10% of the athletes that responded. And they responded that 92% of Olympic athletes were multi-sport participants. 92% were multi-sport participants. And most of them did not specialize until the age of 14 to 16. And most of them were not doing 2 sports, but they were doing 3 and 4 sports. And they also said it was very, very important that they played those sports because it gave them a better foundation for what they're doing. So 92%, surveys, as I said, just went out a week ago, and they're surveying athletes on their sports participation. What did they do? How much did they do? And when did they specialize? And obviously, we'll hear about that 8% that just specialize in one sport. And we'll say that's the model. Well, that's not the model. The model that is going to be communicated is that they participated in multiple sports, they had success, and I've got some charts of all the preeminent athletes and how many of them were multi-sport participation and how many were just single sport participation. So, number 1, early specialization. Number 2, focus on winning. Every expert that we've ever talked to said, look, and when we start to focus on winning, what happens? Kids, parents, coaches will do anything possible to win. And that means they're going to be training earlier, they're going to be doing, their technique is not going to be as good because they'll do anything they can to win. So that focus on winning
is one thing. The second thing is documenting the results. So, we've done this for years. Tennis has always done this for years, and it's just not tennis, but it's all these other sports. They document the results. So, if we're in a 10 and under league, right, they document the results. And if we're in a 10 and under competition, we document the results. And so, if Bill Dopp is playing in a 10 and under tournament, he wins the tournament, and his name goes right at the top. And we give him a big trophy, and we say, "Isn't that great for Bill?" Anything wrong with that? I never thought, good for Bill. But what happens to Kirk Anderson, who's 16 out of 16? What happens if that name would have been Pete Sampras, who would have been 16 out of 16? You know what? Kids deselect themselves if they think they're not very good at an activity. It's called perceived competence. And as long as they perceive themselves as pretty good at something, they will continue to play. And so as soon as we do rankings and ratings and we put documented results up, kids deselect themselves. And who deselects themselves? It's that late bloomer. It's the player it's the later developer, the smaller player. They will just, I'm not very good at this, I'm gone. And they never show up again. And we don't know who those athletes are going to be. And we're down to football territory here. So, quick story. I didn't know this, but this is pretty interesting. That what conference leads for NFL participation? What conference is number one for moving people from their conference to the NFL? SEC, right? SEC. Everybody, that's not surprising to anybody else. What conference is number two? It's the Mid-American Conference. Mid-American. You know who plays in the Mid-American? Western Michigan, Central Michigan, Toledo, Akron, Ball State, Bowling Green. Pretty interesting. So Buffalo. So they're in there. Northern Illinois. There's a powerhouse for you, but they're number two in NFL participation. Interesting. I've been thinking about that. I'm a Western Michigan guy, right? So I thought that's pretty cool, right? We're at Western Michigan, and we've got several athletes that are playing in the NFL from Western Michigan. But I'm thinking, why would a conference like that have so many people moving on to the NFL? Well, if you're in Western, where's Western Michigan, for crying out loud? Anybody know where Western Michigan is located? Kalamazoo. Very good. So we get brownie points for like 4 people here. So Kalamazoo. If you're in Kalamazoo and you're an athlete, or if you're in Michigan, if you're good in high school, where are you going to go to play college football? Michigan, Michigan State, Notre Dame. You've got 3 that are within a half-hour drive, and if you're going to Western, well, you know what? You just couldn't cut it. You just weren't good enough. You know what? You were a late developer, because that's all they get. They get the late developers. They don't get the blue chippers. They go to the SEC, they go to the Big Ten. But interesting. So again, that early specialization, that focus on winning, that we don't want to eliminate anybody. I just came back from a conference. We want to keep kids in the sport until they're 14. Once they're 14, then we've got them. They will move on. But we you know what? Worldwide, or not worldwide, nationwide, we lose 80% of the kids by the time they're 13. All sports. They quit. They just give up, and we lose them completely. And those kids generally don't come back. And then overuse injuries. We've got it's an epidemic of overuse injuries. And again, the people that came to this, they said, you know, these doctors are saying, you know, overuse injuries for small children 10, 12, 14, we never saw them 10 years ago. And now we're seeing all kinds of overuse injuries. And the reason is because people are specializing and they're getting these overuse injuries. So they don't play seasonally. They don't play in moderation, but they play one sport over and over and over again. Just a couple years ago, of our top 4 14-year-old boys in the country, tennis players, 3 of them came down with spinal or spine fractures because of all they did was play tennis. So very interesting about the overuse injuries. So something something to think about. 70%, I said 80%. A lot of people are saying, no, you're wrong, it's 90%. We just lose these kids in droves. And when do they quit? They quit because that's when they start to make that decision at age 13 or 14. They start to make the calls, right? It's not mom and dad saying, we want you to be a soccer player, we want you to be a hockey player, we want you to be a tennis player. Those kids are making the decision. They're saying, no, I've had it, and you know why? What's the number one reason? Number one, it's not fun. Number two, undue pressure from parents. Number three, unmet expectations from coaches. Comes up over and over and over again, and we're part of that population. And that's just not little kids. Every week you open the newspaper and somebody retires from sport, and why do they retire? Why does Andrea say, well, I woke up this morning and it just wasn't fun anymore. And so I thought, I've had a good career and it's time to move on. So and so we talk about fun. Fun's almost like a strange word, because you talk about tennis, you talk about 10 and under tennis, and the number one focus should be on fun. Right? And all of our high performers said, okay, that's good, but you guys are just clowning around, you're just playing silly games, and we want to produce champions here. So we'll talk quite a bit about that. I think all of our speakers are going to talk quite a bit about that. Interesting. Best athletes in the world are moving to extreme sports. It's not me saying this, it's the United States Olympic Committee saying the best athletes in the world are in extreme sports. They're in the snowboarding, they're skateboarding, they're bicycle riding. You've seen these extreme sports, unbelievable, the things that they do. They're in these extreme sports. Why? When you interview these kids, you know what? Why they say this? Why are there so many great athletes on skateboards and snowboards? Because there's no coaches, there's no parents. Ouch. Ouch. And so we take a look at sport, and most people, when they think of 10 and under tennis, they think of youth soccer, they think of anything. It's organized sport. It's organized, highly organized, it's highly structured, and the kids don't have any flexibility, they don't have any room to breathe, and they don't want that. Small children, 10 and under children, 14, 12-year-olds, they want to experiment, they want to have fun, they want to be with their friends, they want to if you've ever watched kids in a skateboard park, and what do? They're out there for hours and hours and hours, and they're challenging each other, and they don't have a coach over there saying, no, that's not the way to do it, this is the way, come on, you've got to think about this, got to concentrate, you've got to focus. But how is their focus? It's unbelievable, because a friend will show them how to do something, and they'll do it over and over and over again, and they'll hurt themselves, and they'll still do it over and over again, because they have this drive to succeed. Kids are driven to move. They're hardwired to move. And every seminar that you're going to see this morning and this afternoon and tomorrow, you're going to see a lot of movement. And that's we go right back to our childhood obesity. That's going to be the key to where we are going to position ourselves in the future. Again, why do kids quit? Well, it becomes a job, right? Because you've got somebody saying, you have to show up at this practice, you have to play these tournaments, you have to do this event, you have to practice, 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 because why? We've got a lot of money invested in you. And again, there's where the overzealous parents, the overzealous coaches, we've got that investment, and the kid feels obligated because the kid, they're being driven to events, they're being driven to lessons, they're being driven to tournaments every other weekend, and they're spending all that hotel money and all that gas time and their parents' time, and there's that great expectation. So again, why do they quit? Because it's not fun, and number two, the failure to meet that coach and parent expectations. So think about that. Just think about that. If you watch other youth sports, if you watch what we do internally, we have these great expectations for everybody. Drive, because you're going to get a college scholarship. You're going to be the number one player in the world. You're going to be the number one player in the South. And kids, they don't care. They just want to play. And I know you're going to say, well, wait a minute, I've got a kid that wants to be number one in the world. Well, they all do, right? Pretty much any kid that starts to play, they say, I want to be the best player in the world. So, yeah, we understand that, but again, they're kids, they really don't understand what kind of commitment is going to have. But, take a look at this guy. We just came from my grandson's playing flag football, first and second grade flag football. And I watched the game, but I'm watching the coaches. and the coaches scared me. I'm an adult, but they scared me, and I can't imagine what was going through a 6 and 7-year-old's head mind when a coach is right there saying, "You got to square up, you got to square up," and I'm thinking, square up? What do these kids know about squaring up? It's just, geez, but that was scary. All right, so here we go. Here's the state of youth tennis in this country. So how are we doing? How are we doing compared to other sports and compared to other countries? How do we do in this country? So let's take a look. Historically, and this is the neat thing about 10 under 10 because we have all kinds of people, and all of our TSRs are good. They say, "Oh yeah, people are they all say they're doing 10 under tennis, and they've got the foam balls, and they've got the junior rackets, and they've got the mini nets, and they're saying, yeah, everything's great. We're doing this stuff." And we look at it and say, "No, you're not. I've got some foam balls, yes, but you're really not doing it. You haven't changed your methodology." And I know Mike and Michelle and everybody they're going to talk about that. So historically, what have we done? And I'm telling you, this is the biggest turnoff in the world. We put kids in lines, we feed balls to them, and that's the traditional method. And we do what? Lesson after lesson after lesson. And I came out of that system. Probably a lot of you came out of that system where we took those type of things and we persevered. We stuck with it. But a kid today is not going to put up with that kind of stuff. They're not going to stay in the line. They want immediate gratification. They want to move. And who likes to stay in the line for anything around here? I mean, none of us like to do that. If I go into a fast food restaurant, they got 4 people, I'm probably out of there. I'm not going to stand. I'm going to go through the drive-thru because I can't stand to put myself in line. So we take lessons after lessons after lesson. And I've talked to many teaching pros. They say, when do your kids really get out and play? When do they compete? When do they get in other events where they can play against other kids? Well, we're still working on that forehand, backhand, serve, and volley. And as soon as we get that down, we're going to try to do a little bit more spin. And as soon as we get that, we're going to go over a little bit more power. And then they're going to be ready to play a tournament. All right? You've heard that story over and over again. So once the skill level is good enough, they go straight into competition. What happens that first competition? So you've got your 10, they've moved up to the 11s and they're ready to play. You've done a lot of lessons with them and they're pretty good forehands and backhands. They get in the car, they drive to the nearby city tournament. They play their first match, and what happens? They get their brains beat out. Maybe they don't hardly score any points because they haven't learned how to compete. They can hit a forehand and backhand, but they don't know how to compete. So that happens all the time. And what happens then on the way home? Well, after the parents get in and slam the doors, they talk about, hey, there's not much effort out there. We put a lot of money into you, and we don't see that effort out there on the court. Things have to change. We're not going to continue to do this if you're not going to perform. And so if you're a kid, put yourself, you're 11 years old, for crying out loud. How do you feel about that? You can't wait to play another tournament, right? And we're going to show you what's happening. You laugh, but it's sad because these kids are not coming back. A lot of kids have played one tournament, never play another one. So what does that mean? They're not getting a very good first experience. So we've all seen that happen. So here we go. Let's focus back. Here's a guy, everybody knows Arthur Ashe. He said this in 1987. He said, first we need a much larger group of players between 8 and 11. I mean, I hear that every day. And probably a lot of us in the USDA, we hear that. We need more players, right? So I hear this all the time. Number one, we need more players. Number two, we need better players. We need better athletes playing tennis. So he says, young players shouldn't focus on rankings. They'll burn out much too soon. Other solutions include smaller courts, starting out. How about that? 1987, Arthur Ashe. Pretty sharp guy. So here we are, 25 years later. We have 100,000 tournament players. In this country, we have 100,000 registered tournament players. Pretty sad. So something's not happening. We're not getting kids to play. We're not getting kids to play in tournaments. And we only have 23,000 frequent players. So if we take a look at other countries, if we take a look at France, France has 400,000 junior players. have 100. France has 400,000. What's going on there? And they've got them playing tournaments, and they've got them in a pipeline. Well, no wonder they've got more players. Spain the same way. They've got more players. They have more junior players than we do. And so there's definitely a disconnect with what we're doing. We've been involved with this since Arthur Ashe talked about it in 1985. You know, the USTA came up with a program called short tennis. And then Wilson came up with Pee-wee tennis. John Weil started. And then PTR came up with a book called Munchkin Tennis. We wrote a book in 1995 with the USPTA called Little Tennis. You know what? Nothing happened. Nobody moved the dial with any of those programs. And what were they? They were just curriculums on lesson plans on how to teach little kids. And they didn't have anything that actually got them into a competition or play format. And if you're just taking lesson after lesson after lesson, and we've got these all great materials, and they were all good, but no, they didn't lead to anything. They didn't get you playing. They just gave you another lesson. They gave you another activity that you could do. So we needed to do something, and if you take a look at the 6 specifications for 10 and under tennis, one of the 6 is what? It's the scoring format. So you've got the court dimensions, you've got the rackets, the balls, the age, and you have a scoring format. And the whole idea is that you scale the matches down to the child. And you know, if you take a look at it, it could be a time match, it could be a tie break, it could be short sets, but it's scaled down. Other sports have done this. All of the other sports have done this. They've scaled the matches down. So if you're 10, you know, gosh, I mean, 5 years ago, and it's still happening in too many places in the country, if you're 10 years old, they provide tournaments for you, and you play 2 out of 3 sets. How stupid is that? No wonder kids are getting injured, because they're out there, and have you ever seen a 10-year-old play 2 out of 3 sets? How long does it take? Hours. Because they do what they get, there's no tactics involved. It's just me hitting the ball over to the other side of the net, high and deep down the middle, because I really can't move people around the court. I can't attack them. I can't expose a weakness, and it's me against the other person, and whoever can hit the most balls back deep down the middle is going to win. And if I get somebody else that's pretty good, we're going to be out there a while. And then I play, I get my hour break, and I do that again. For crying out loud, pros aren't doing that. Think about that. You get a day off. My favorite slide. I'm going to get out of the way so we can see this. This is, all right, so lots of kids are in lessons, but very few are competing. Look at this slide. This is typical. I always, you know, I fly all over the country, and no matter where my airplane lands, this is what I see. And I have people say, no, that's not happening in my club. And I go, excuse me? What's happening out there? So here we go. Little girl, how's that form? Pretty good? There's the ball. I like how engaged these kids are. and this is a good program, because look, we're safe. We've got spots. Okay, line up on the spots. We've got spots. So everybody's on the spot. This guy, you know, he has no idea. This guy, I don't know what he's doing. He's ready to knock this guy's head off right here. Right? Little girl, bless her heart. Little girl, she's paying attention at least. She's somewhat engaged. She's ready for her turn. The boy's completely out of it. Right? This guy here, and this guy, you know, he's just told him to stand. He's got 2 spots, so he's doing his job. When you're at the end of the line, there's 2 spots. Put your feet right there, and sooner or later you'll get up there, and we'll take a look, and you'll have perfect form. But there's the ball. So how do we compare? This isn't just a graphic, right? But if you take a look at other sports, I'm going to use a couple friends of mine because I think they've got it right. If you, and I'll use my son too, because other sports, if you sign up for soccer, what do? Saturday you play. If you sign up for almost any other sport, you get the schedule, and we're playing. If you sign up, and I'll go right back. This was like, gosh, 25, almost 30 years ago. Got the Park and Rec brochure. My son was a good student. He was a really good student. And we looked at the Park and Rec brochure. It comes to you in the mailbox. Everybody gets them in April, right? And we looked at it and said, you know, soccer league, baseball league, swim team, soccer team, tennis lessons. He looked at that and said, Dad, I'm sorry, it's summer. I don't want to take lessons in anything, but I just want to play. I want to be on the team. I want to play. So George Capostadium, many of you know, is a great speaker. He doesn't offer tennis lessons anymore. When you go to his club, you sign up and you get in the tennis program, or the tennis league, or the tennis team tennis, or whatever. And what it is, you get the schedule, and here's the times you play. And you know what? Here's the times you practice. So it's built in, and parents are looking at it and say, well, gee, we don't want to take tennis lessons. He said, no, we'll give you tennis lessons, but you're going to play every Friday afternoon or every Saturday. You're going to play. He's got kids, and you know, Butch does the same thing. You got to get them playing. When you get them playing, they can develop into really good little players very soon. So that's pretty interesting. So here we go. Junior players in this country. We've got. Now, I got two slides. I said 100,000, but we've got 99,000. We've got 1.8 million junior players in this country, and only 99,000 of them actually compete. So look at all those. Look at all those. I mean, come on. That's almost 1 million players that are. What are they doing? They're taking lessons, I guess. So interesting. All right. So high school players. Here's a good number. 355,000. How do we rank as far as high school participation with other sports? Anybody have any idea? 1 to 10, 1 to 20. Nobody has a clue. Okay, so girls, number 10. 10 out of all the high school sports, 10, and we've been about 10, 9 or 10 for the last 25 years. So nothing has changed. Boys, 11 or 12. So those are good numbers. Those are good numbers. And we're really lucky in this country because we have high school sports. Think about the European countries. When they lose kids at 14, they lose them because there's no place for them to play. So if I'm a 14-year-old and I've deselected myself because I'm still 16 on that list of 16, if I quit when I'm 14, I don't have any place to play. So at least we've got high school tennis, and like it or not, we've got a lot of kids that are playing and they're still in the game, and they might not be very good, but they're playing. And that's a good thing. I think that's a great thing. And those kids are probably people like us that, you know, we played high school tennis, we moved on, and we became ultimately teaching pros. So that's pretty good. Junior team tennis. 75,000. That's a huge number. So out of our 1.8 million kids, we've got 75,000 kids playing junior team tennis. That number is up 10,000 in the last 10 years. So obviously that's not a good product, right? And I say that, I'm from the USTA, but that's a USTA product. Obviously we're not hitting the mark there. Now, what's wrong with that? I don't know, but we've got the wrong format, something's wrong, because we know that all the other youth sports, kids like to be on teams. They like to be with their teammates. And so we've got to come up with a product that we can put kids on teams, and maybe you have them. Maybe you have them at your club, you're doing that type of things, you're just not registering them. And that's great, I'm fine with that. So we want kids to play tennis. Let's take a look at hockey. So hockey, they've got 350,000 registered players. Those kids are playing hockey. They're playing. They're competing. What's the fastest growing youth sport in the country right now? 636,000 lacrosse players. Wow. Again, when my airplane lands and I'm driving to the tennis club, I drive past fields right now, and I'm seeing just tons of lacrosse players. Lacrosse big in Atlanta, it's big in the South. I mean, it's huge in the East. It's getting really big in the West, and it's getting these pockets all over the place. But it's crazy as far as their growth goes. So here we go. So here's our chart, and as I said, if you play one tournament, you probably can't wait to play another one, right? Because you got your brains beat out and you had that horrible ride home. So 99,000 kids play one tournament. It drops 38%. The players that play 2 tournaments. And then if you're going to get a ranking, or 3 tournaments, and you've got to get a ranking for it, so if you play 2, it drops 76%. not good. Something is wrong with our tournament format. Then something's wrong when we're losing that number of kids every year that play tennis tournaments. So, and if they're not playing tournaments, what are they doing? Well, they're taking lessons, or I don't know what they're doing. But and we take a look at this, and 23,000 tournament players, we have 355,000 high school players. Well, take a look at that. That's interesting. You've got all these people that want to play, but they're certainly not playing tournaments. There's got to be some reasons for that. So, we get back into our 10 and under format now. So let's take a look at some of the things that are happening that are good with that, and we're starting to fill the pipeline, and we've got an opportunity to do it right. So, we've had some pretty good success. Butch recognizes these kids. These are kids at Butch's club in Midtown. Look like they're having fun. I'll tell a story on Butch. He took a group of kids to Kalamazoo to watch the national junior 18 and 16. If you've ever been to Kalamazoo to watch that tournament, it's phenomenal. It's like a pro level tournament. It's admission every day, stadium court, the whole thing. So he thought, I'll bring some kids from Chicago and we'll go watch matches. And these kids are 16, 18. They will inspire with these kids. Well, they also had, Prince had this little booth, and they had in the parking lot, they had a mini net and foam balls and rackets. So the kids watched matches. How long did they last, Butch? About 20 minutes, and then they went over and they played foam ball tennis for the rest of the day. Again, Butch's kids, obviously, they're not well behaved, getting out and walking around, but no, they wanted to play. Kids are hard to play, so he brought all these 10-under kids. We were doing a video shoot the next couple of days, and we used these kids. But again, pretty interesting. They wanted to play. Those kids love to play. Here's the good news. We're making an impact. This is how do you judge an impact with 10-under tennis? Well, number one is you can take a look at the ball sales. You can take a look, and just in the last couple of years, we've doubled it, and the numbers are even up more this year. And so we heard about, okay, the first couple of years you're going to fill your baskets up, and nobody's buying the balls before, and now they are. So obviously you're going to get a lot of growth. Well, we continue. We're doubling and adding 1 million balls every year. How much courts? More and more courts are being built. And this is something that 5 years ago I said, people aren't going to build courts. Are you kidding? You're going to put lines down in courts. You're going to do this type of things. And I look at I always use the example of Little League baseball. And Little League baseball is over 50 years old. And somebody said, we're going to make fields the size for kids. Somebody put a stake in the ground and said that. And again, if you fly, you look down at the ground and you see more Little League baseball fields than you do full-size baseball fields. So somebody said, yes, they could have said, we'll use the big fields and we'll just put some bases down that are shorter distance. We'll get it. We'll be with that. So no, we're getting more and more courts that are being lined. We're getting more and more courts that are standalone 36 and 60-foot courts. Pretty interesting. Greg, you're lining all your courts? Yeah? At all your facilities? So how many facilities do you have, Greg? 18. Lifetime Fitness, 18 tennis clubs, a lot of courts. And you've got lines on every one. Midtown does the same thing, Butch? Yep. So it's happening. And we're making a point that even if you go to, people say, well, if you get lines on the courts at the U.S. Open, then we'll put lines down. Well, you know what? If you go to the National Tennis Center, there's lines on those courts. We don't have lines on our Thrash Stadium because it's a pro event only, but the rest of the courts are lined, and they are lined throughout the year. So we're seeing a lot more courts, which is a really good thing. Here's one of the keys that we're looking at, and we want you to take this, and everybody in this room can do this, and probably many of you are doing it, but play it. And we talked about lessons and that transition from lesson to tournament, and that's not a good transition. That's usually not a good experience. But what we have is we've come up with an idea, and it's not unique, but we've got something called a play day. What's a play day? It's where you get together with a group of kids and you play for a couple hours. And if there are 10 of us, we try to play 9 other kids, and maybe we play for 4 or 5 minutes, and we come off the court, we get a drink, and then we go out there again and we play. And we come off the court, we change around, and we play. And so we're mixing in play with food, with activity, and at the end of the day, we give everybody a piece of pizza or Butch does a movie, a play and movie night. It's complete chaos, but kids come back over and over again because it's a fun thing. You're not documenting results. We're not handing out trophies the size of refrigerators for the winners, and they just come back and they play. So nobody's eliminating. We're giving kids a lot of chances to play. Butch does some documenting, kind of internal, so that when you get a critical mass, he puts them in tiers. So we've got maybe 8 kids that are pretty good, 8 kids that are kind of played a couple events, and 8 kids that might be starting out. He doesn't want to mix those up too much because it's not a good experience. So play days, you can see the numbers that we have and really expanding. And these are registered play days. And I'm sure that a lot of you, your clubs, you hit on that formula. You're offering either individual play or team play, and getting kids out there on a regular basis so they get a chance to play. So again, our biggest challenge is the challenge of providing age-appropriate competition. What's age-appropriate competition? What does it look like? Well, if we're in this group, we divide up, we get in groups, and we play either on a team or individually, but we play and we get a chance to play a lot of different kids and a lot of different experiences. Short duration matches. We like the time matches. Butch, you like time matches? I mean, it's great because the parents can say, gee, I can drop Billy off or Susie off at this time. I pick them up at this time because, and during that time, they're going to get 6 matches with 6 different kids and have a slice of pizza at the end and a soda, and it's a good experience. And the parents like it. The kids have a good time, and it prepares them for competition a little bit along the way. So here's the pathway. Here's the new pathway. And remember the pathway? This is funny. This is when I started with the USC. They had probably some of you in this room. We had the try, learn, play, and compete. Remember that? Few heads are nodding. And that was okay. So think about that. Try. There it is. It's still there. Try. And then we had learn. And then we had play. And then we had compete. And I said, I don't know if too many people are going through that system. My system, try, learn, play, and compete. I tried, I played, I competed, and then I learned. I never had a lesson until I was in high school, and the high school coach gave me some tips. Right? So, and I competed before I even had any lessons. Anybody go through that sort of format? Where you just, when you tried it, you went out there and played. You went out there and played with your friends. Did you compete? You're darn right you did. You competed like crazy. Not in sanctioned tournaments, but you competed every day. And then, but we didn't really get into that organized lesson. So try, play to learn, play days, team play. And why is team play important? Because it's a whole lot softer introduction. Soccer, basketball, baseball, they're all team sports. Lacrosse, hockey, great team sports, great participation, and old boss Ron Wood, probably some of you know him. He said there's 4 things that happen in team competition. 4 situations. Number 1, you win and your team wins. So if you're playing a tournament match and you're playing on a team, you win, your team wins. How do you feel? Great. Doesn't get any better than that. You win, your team wins. That's a great thing. Number 2 situation. You win, your team loses. How do you feel? Come on, we all feel pretty good. Okay, we feel bad because our team got beat, but, we won. Right? Number 3, you lose, your team wins. How do you feel? You don't feel as good, but you know what? You can still celebrate because your team won. Right? So you win, your team wins. You win, your team loses. You lose, your team wins. 3 fairly positive experiences. How about the 4th one? You lose, your team loses. Obviously, you're in the wrong league. You go have a piece of pizza. It doesn't really matter because we're in the wrong program. So, but 3 of those 4 in a team situation, team play, are favorable or somewhat favorable. So we need to take a look. How do we get more kids? And as I said, junior team tennis, and I say this from a USTA perspective, not cutting it at all. But we need to get kids on teams and let them play on teams and let them participate on teams. And if you do that in your clubs and your camps, I can't imagine having a camp where you don't put kids on teams and let them compete, and that's always the greatest thing. You know, you're doing Fed Cup or Davis Cup, and you've got cheers, and it's always a good thing. So team competition, and then finally getting into competition. And again, we're trying to make this age appropriate, non-elimination, round robin, compass draws, tiered events, things like that. So even the competition is not the traditional single elimination type competition. So here we go. Play days, we think that's the formula. Get more kids playing. We're going to create a lot. We are creating a lot of 10 and under kids, and we are getting them to play more and more and more. And these play days are that soft competition. Most of it is right there at the club or their park or their facility, so they're familiar with their surroundings, and then they might venture out and play some other clubs as a team. All good stuff. So, key ingredient to our success, we need to get kids out there playing more. Whatever that competition looks like, and the competition format is going to be different than what it's been in the past, and we want to get kids to love competition. So, is that being looked at from the other sports? Yeah, I didn't even mean to do this, but I just came from a summit called Sport and Society, and it was an Aspen Institute, and the Aspen Institute's a think tank, and they bring in experts from all over the world, and they take a look at a problem, and they have experts that take a look at the problem, and they provide solutions, they provide some answers, and fortunately for us, youth sport became one of these problems, and the Aspen Institute's privately funded, and they came up with something called Project Play, Reimagining Youth Sports in America. So again, if we take a look at 70 to 80% of kids give up sport by the time they're 13, and we've got an obesity problem in this country, we can draw some correlations there. And I just came back from a summit called Kid Focus, Coach Driven, What Training is Needed. And so if we know that kids are quit the sport because of undue expectations from coaches and parents, you know, what are we doing about that? That's just not tennis, but that's the other sports as well. So that's where we are. There are some answers out there. We don't have all the answers, obviously, but at least we can identify some of the problems and are working towards that. I bring this up because it's going to be really interesting in the next couple of years with the childhood obesity problem, with the lack of youth spontaneous play, with the lack of organized play after 13 or 14. A lot of people, all of the sport organizations, and then you're getting other organizations that are you know, health organizations and education institutions, and you know, who one of the biggest drivers of this, and you don't even see their name on it in this Project Play thing, is Nike. And they are putting all their marketing money, for the first time ever, they're starting to put marketing money into youth sport. They've never done this before, but now they realize that, wow, we've got a problem, and is it for their benefit? Yes, because if we don't have kids playing, what happens? They're not going to buy athletic shoes and t-shirts. And so they're saying, wow, we're heading towards the perfect storm. We don't have adults playing as much, we don't have kids playing as much, we don't have people coming through the pipeline, we've got this obesity problem, we've got this health issue, we've got to do something about it. So they're being responsible and putting a lot of money into this, but again, I want you to be aware of that because that's where the money's going to flow. We're also talking to the Ad Council. It's an independent group. The Ad Council does things like smoking cessation, and they'll put ads on television and radio and newspapers and magazines at their cost, and they spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on promoting a certain topic. And it was, you know, at one time it was smoking cessation. It was getting children in appropriate car seats. And, you know, they'll spend a lot of money getting that sort of thing. You know, where they're looking at putting money into right now is youth sport. And youth sport, we have an opportunity to be the best model youth sport in the country. So they're going to drive people, they're going to drive kids, they're going to drive parents and coaches to programs that have great activity. And everybody in the room goes, wow, tennis is perfectly suited for that. I agree. I certainly think we are. Are we there yet? I certainly think we are not. And I got the 2-minute warning. So the answer is exactly what you're going to get here today. and tomorrow, you don't want the New York Times showing up and saying, we're gonna do an article on you and your program, and see those kids standing in line, because they're just gonna butcher us. So if we see a lot of activity and maximum contacts and tons of movement, encouraging coaches and kids having fun, we are the model sport, and the money's going to be flowing for that. So that's just some of my perspective. I hope that there's a few things that I said that maybe will resonate, maybe a few things that you're doing that you want to do more, and I'm really looking forward to the seminars today and tomorrow, because we're going to get kids active, and you're going to be at the forefront of this. So I could probably have 1 minute, Bill, to answer any questions. Mr. Dodge.
Sure. With the team tennis, you mentioned that there might be some changes. Looking at what format changes, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah, so Bill's asking the question: what format changes do you think? Here's what we know. We know that young kids like to be with their own gender. So we've got a system, and where do we get the system from? From World Team Tennis. Men's doubles, women's singles, kids they don't want to play. They don't want to necessarily be with kids of opposite genders. So that's one format. It's also prescribed: doubles, singles, doubles, mixed doubles. Well, you know what? You might only have 6 kids. You might have 30 kids. So what do you do to put kids on teams? So I think the format, it has to be a conceptual format. We want kids to be on teams, but let's not prescribe one singles, doubles, mixed doubles. Let them play on teams, and let the local communities figure it out. The clubs figure it out. We got teams. We've got 8 kids, but 7 other boys. Okay, what do? Well, we got another club that has 8 kids and 7 of them are girls. So how do you figure that out? How do you do that? And I think that there's ways you can do that by including a bigger group and start to get some team organizers, some group organizers, and say, well, we can move some people around here and give these kids an opportunity to play on teams. All right, Mr. Bill, thank you very much, and I look forward. To the rest of the conference, especially afternoon. We'll get you out on the court to do some agility, balance, and coordination.
Right. Thank you, Kirk. We're going to go to the tennis courts now for the next 2 modules. So I would like to say that I know how to get there. We're going to go out the front door, and maybe someone, Bill, is familiar, and will lead the way. Don't leave your social security number or your credit card.
What does everybody do after they scan the badge? After you get this, then what do you go to?
To me, that's the most important program we have, not the academy, even though that's a big revenue. Right. I'm very well. Things going well for you?
Yeah.
Well,
Nice.
down here for a few years. 9 hours away for you?
Yeah. Vanderbilt. Where are you at?
Still in Eastern.
Yeah. Awesome.
We were visiting our apartment.
Okay.
Just down the road.
Yeah.
Tuesday night.
Awesome.
So we're getting back after.
Is anybody else? You from Northern?
Great class. No. It's me and Greg from
Yeah. Is John still with you? Or
yes, he is. Yeah, he's like doing
Yeah.
really well. Yeah, most of the folks are all there doing their stuff.
Yeah.
How about things for you?
Yeah, it's good. And just a lot of team tennis. Sort of modeling some of my dad's methods.
I'm sure.
Just all he has like 200 kids I know every summer, but he always says 120 are playing team tennis. Focus on that. Don't try to catch a number. Just keep them involved.
Yes.
Like Kirk's like big on team stuff. It's definitely got to structure my 10 under program better in terms of like all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen all these guys a couple times. Sure. Keep working, finding ways, and keep retooling it. My boss said, like, you've been working on this for years. Come on, keep changing them.
Tweak it.
Yeah, and everyone changes the way they teach. So.
Absolutely. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
It's not going to be the
Not
same.
gonna use
It's
the
not
same one
as
every
20
year.
years ago. So, yeah, if it is, then there's probably something wrong.
Yeah.
We should have learned something over a decade or less or more.
Recently, it's been the kids want to play orange. We test them out a little bit.
Not the evaluation.
Once you dab them, they're like,
No, this is evaluation.
it's interesting to get credit for this.
Right. You just
Oh, you wouldn't believe what I've been doing with the USPTA.
So you always scan your badge first, and then you scan it.
Okay, I've got my phone now.
Scan your badge and then
What am I scanning my badge?
get to the QR reader. Do you have a QR reader?
I do, but I can't get it back to the where.
So you got to download quite a few might not have it.
Right, so what happens is then when I do go back.
I've got it on my iPad.
Okay, yeah. Great.
I mean, I've had it on for a while. The app, I just. I don't use it right now.
Oh, the time's ticking. We got
I
10
don't know
minutes
how
to do
get
this.
it
I'm
back.
out.
I know. Get even more nervous. Well, I think I'm just gonna.
Can you go back to the original program?
I mean, I've gone out of it. Which one are you using? One that looks like that? Oh, yeah, that one. See, that's what and it just goes there. I've tapped on everything. You have to go on the games. You only have one.
Just go to this little button that says scan.
Oh, there. I hit that so many times.
Okay, cool. But see if you can get yours to work, because I keep every time.
I don't have a QR.
Okay, there's, I think the papers up here. Let me go to the, geez, I'm focusing on. Is it geez?
Do I scan the next one too?
No, you can only,
There is no,
yeah, after.
QR on the iPhone. Is it Grokta or Crofta? You get to carry this around, I know she's like around someone else's.
Okay.
Because there's notes.
Okay.
Use someone else's smartphone. I don't know. I'll go talk to her.
Class, I don't want you to miss that.
But see, what I did
did was I went back and I did.
I used that could be why. That could be why.
I'm from Alabama. Not from
Here, put your thing on the table.
Carol, get over here.
Now stand here.
Oh, did I?
Single track, I'm hitting that, but
Steady.
This has got to take. You sure it's cracked?
That's what I'm saying, maybe it's ground. Okay, we got this one to do. We got it.
No, usually just kind of the little thing in the red thing, so it goes up and down, so it tries to read it. It's not doing that.
Okay. Now the second thing is to scan that.
I kept doing that. Keep doing it.
There you go. It didn't work. How you doing? What's the name of it now? No, that says school system.
Yeah, so I think you're good.
They scan your badge.
Is it Crofter or Crafter?
Mine's, mine says QRAP.
Oh, it is in the queue, okay.
I can't see.
Okay, so it's, all right, so I did.
All I have is the app, I don't have the expertise on how to use it.
That's
So my 10 minutes is clicking where it is.
All right, thank you. Ask Pat, because he's pretty knowledgeable about situations like that. If not, here's paper. You can just write it down. I did scan it, or like this.
Bill, you know I was here.
And then it says.
Oh, now the course is papers.
There you go. I mean, great, it's gonna go. Yes. Okay, I just can't scan it. Right. All right, thanks.
Once it says course scanned, you're good?
Yes.
In this
course.
For this
Now,
one?
next
Right.
hour.
The problem, it took me 5 times before it finally said that.
Some, you know, sometimes.
Is there the paper that I can take with me, that I can just write it down and what, do we mail it in then or something?
No, give it to Pat
At the end? Let me just in case. So for each course you do one?
Yes, technology. Seems like it takes someone to scan it.
It's actually more.
Oh, no, no, I
Yes,
agree.
real time
I
tape
agree.
course.
I'm just saying, if something happens that it, it doesn't take.
Right.
So I'll be scanning them, don't
No,
worry.
they call it.
But I just thought as a
And you can
backup.
scan for someone else too, because they have.
Well, the
that
problem is
unique
it took
badge.
me 6 to
Exactly.
get it to go.
And then for PTR, that's what you're.
Do you know where we're going?
Right.
Of course,
Do you know how to get there?
There's no.
You do? I am
So, I think you probably, no, I'm not sure. Kirk, how does PTR work? Do they go each individual class also?
I have no idea.
You mean only that you're here?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm gonna be because I work
After 10 minutes, I finally got that to scan, but I don't,
Okay.
that doesn't look like that.
Did you also do this one?
No.
Oh. All right.
So-
Now go over here and scan this and see what happens. Cause that may be just a generic one.
That's not it.
It just, that could be a generic one. It's fine.
So then,
Then you do this next hour.
okay.
Okay. That's the safe way to do it. Now next, it may be your internet connection at this
You're right.
moment
I
is
think
clogged up.
Almost down.
Yeah, it's fact. Yes, sir.
It did
He was
anything?
wondering if you wanted the conversation up all day.
Yeah, because we're gonna be back, you can leave that, we're gonna be back. We're gonna be back, inside in the afternoon.
We'll see if it works
Right?
this time.
Yeah.
Kurt, let me borrow your, thank you.
I figured that.
Had a good crew, didn't you?
Yeah,
This,
yeah.
you'll be.
Let me see,
I think you wanna hand them in at the end of this. Yeah, let's see.
Yeah, okay, we'll actually be back here for lunch, and then we'll be back, we'll do a panel discussion in here, and then we'll do, and you're gonna be here for that?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. And then we'll be, so we do have a couple more things, you know, some courts, and we're a little bit back and forth. Here you go, that's yours, thank you. I'll give you these.
No worries, take your time.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
Thank you for your.
Yeah,
One, I've got a bunch of.
as I say, you might find it somewhere else. That's what happens at our conventions, that I don't know.
I was gonna try to break
The
them down,
traffic
but-
could
But no, it
go
works
crazy,
everything
who
else.
knows?
me turn this
Every
off.
other website.
Uh-huh.
This doesn't need to keep, we recorded everything you've been saying now.
Oh, how about that?